on his way. Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Motherfucker, he's on his...
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Listener discretion is advised. The show contains graphic language and depictions of violence. It may not be suitable for all audiences.
We say fuck a lot. Hey guys, welcome back to Mountain Murders.
I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
So we meet again.
Oh, we gotta quit meeting like this.
This Labor Day weekend, extended long weekend, Dylan.
I'm still off.
When the words extended and long pop in your brain, I know exactly what you're thinking about.
Oh, you can't bait me into that conversation.
Weekends. That's what you're thinking about.
Of course.
Yeah, did you have a great weekend?
Yes, went and seen my mama.
You saw your mama?
Yep.
I know, I feel like I didn't see much of you this weekend, even though we were together technically. We didn't spend a lot of time together, but I'm glad you had a good visit with your mom.
Yeah, it was nice to see her and my uncle. It was very great to see them again and spend a little time kicking it with them.
Okay, so we have kittens that have decided to take up space in the podcast room, and they think this is their domain now. So if you hear a lot of weird random sounds in the background throughout the podcast, it's probably the cats.
Oh my God, am I going to have to punch them in their little kitten stomach?
Oh, that's terrible. No, I tell them to fuck off, but they just ignore me like everyone else does.
Like they don't understand English.
Some weird crime news coming out of South Carolina this weekend, Dylan.
Yeah, so I thought this was a strange story in the beginning, and now it seems to be getting stranger.
So 3 months after Maggie Murdaugh and her son Paul Murdaugh were murdered at their home, prominent South Carolina attorney Alex Murdaugh was shot in the head at his Hampton County, South Carolina residence over the weekend. He was changing a tire. He is conscious and he is speaking, which is a good sign. But this is just wild, Dylan. It is months after his wife and son are brutally murdered.
Yeah, someone, it seems, pulled up in their driveway or waited on them to get out of their car and basically executed them.
He was taken to a trauma center in Savannah, Georgia, the 53-year-old Murdaugh. Again, I mean, his family's already suffered this great loss. It was on June 7th that Maggie, age 52, and her son Paul, age 22, were shot on the family's 1,700-acre hunting estate.
Huh, sounds a lot like my hunting estate.
So he found them lying on the ground and called 911 at 10:07 p.m. Both died of multiple gunshot wounds, and it's being handled as a homicide. Now, there have been no suspects arrested in that case, leading conversations in the area to turn into this like murder mystery saga, like big family, old money, new drama.
Ooh.
And everybody has a theory about who did it. So now we're finding that he's been shot. I mean, where is this all going to lead, Dylan?
Well, and I think we must remember and point out the youngest Murphy son there was embroiled in a trial, or was set to go on trial, for the accidental death of a young lady who was 19 years old, a boating accident. And it's alleged to have that he was smelled of alcohol, was never given breathalyzer, was kind of handled in a way that most wouldn't be handled by the police in that scenario. So, I don't know. I have to speculate. Is it someone getting revenge for this young lady's death?
Well, what's interesting, Dylan, is that folks in the community have spoken to the media and say that the family is both loved and feared in the community. Though they were known for their good deeds within the community, the family is kind of frightening, and people were like, you don't cross the Murdaughs. And if you do cross them, you don't let them find out it was you who crossed them, because they'll come down on you hard, and they'll come down on you with all that they've got. They have a lot of influence and power, and they'll use it against their enemies.
Yes, apparently they're in what is referred to as the Low Country region in South Carolina, multiple counties. A Murdaugh man has served as solicitor for multiple generations.
For more than 100 years, the family has been connected to the law and judicial system in Hampton County.
Yeah, solicitor, top prosecutor, and things of that nature. And you've got to imagine that if they wanted to make your life a living hell there locally in a kind of small town area, I think they could.
Well, it sounds like someone has turned the tables on this family.
Now, what I do find interesting about the father's injuries is they're kind of being referred to as superficial.
Yes.
So there was
Now,
nothing.
we're just speculating here. We're not trying to get sued. We don't know. We have theories like everyone else.
Oh yes, and speculating that it is connected to the death of that poor young girl there on the lake in that boating accident. That's my speculation. No one said in the subsequent murders of the mother and son, youngest son, were connected to that, obviously. But my old mountain justice head, if people feel like you're truly not getting help and I think this type of family, you would be worried about getting a fair trial and just trial as far as if they're in the wrong. Wouldn't you be concerned in that area?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think someone's decided to take the law in their own hands with this case. But it also makes me wonder if Dad has these superficial injuries. Is it something more sinister? Like, was he in on the death of his wife and son?
Oh, I love the way your true crime mind works. Well, I mean, I'll say you have the execution of his wife and youngest son in their driveway. Those wounds were not superficial. They were very. It was obvious someone wanted to make sure they were dead.
Yeah.
Right?
So why would someone take them out with excessive lethal force with this, firestorm of bullets?
Oh wow.
And yet Dad gets a superficial gunshot wound. I mean, it just seems to me if someone meant business, Dad would be taken out of the picture as well.
Well, certainly if it's the same individual or individuals who killed the other two family members, you would expect they would use the same efficiency to attack the father, right?
Yes, I'm sorry. I have a kitten over here gnawing on my toe.
Oh my God.
Well, Dylan, we have an interesting case today suggested by one of our patrons, and it was just too good to pass up.
Oh my. You've been working diligently on this case the last couple of days. Well, before we even went on our little trip, and so more than a couple of days. But I'm just very. It seems like you have a lot of material on it.
There's a lot I've been able to uncover. Are you ready?
Let's go.
A resource, I'm going to go ahead and begin by telling you my main resource today was a book by Jody McDaniel Lowry called Jan. And I also used various newspaper articles because this is an older crime. At this point, it is 41 years old.
Wow.
So, being able to dig up some of those old news articles was very helpful in my research. All right. Janice Buttrum didn't stand a chance, as they say, Dylan.
Oh, my God.
She was born January 17th, 1963, to 18-year-old Marie Beavers. Janice is the second of 8 children born to Marie and an unknown father.
That's a lot of kids.
Marie was a drug-addicted prostitute who made a deal with an older couple, Ralph and Elizabeth Adcock, for the price of $60, which covered the hospital stay. Marie agreed to give her newborn daughter to this couple.
Okay. The price of what? $60?
$60, which covered the hospital stay for
Okay.
labor and delivery.
Well, it seems like the baby might be worth more than that, but
Janice would later refer to herself as a black market baby. The Adcocks never officially adopted Janice, but became her parents while they were in their early 50s. Ralph worked for Georgia's Department of Transportation, and his wife Elizabeth was like a stay-at-home wife. Both were alcoholics. So life with the Adcocks was dysfunctional. Janice was incredibly... Was that another kitten? Jeez.
yeah, it fell. I think it's running now. Maybe it'll leave.
Oh, my goodness. They're wild. Janice was incredibly deprived, Dylan. She was not taught basic hygiene, and her parents weren't meeting the girl's basic needs. Poor Janice was isolated, and by the time she enrolled in school, Janice was an outcast, the unkempt, smelly kid who was bullied relentlessly by peers. They claimed that they saw her family dumpster diving, and she often wore clothes that they had picked up from the garbage dump.
You can always count on bullies to make some poor kid's life all that much more traumatic. You know
Of
what I mean?
course you can.
So, I mean, I just wasn't that type of kid, I guess. If I saw someone who was obviously very, very poor, I mean, people dumpster diving. Well, people do it now as like a fad, I guess. Some
It's
people.
like trendy.
It's trendy to, well, they repurposed food or some shit like that. But no, we're talking about people who really, they don't have anything else. And they're digging through there looking for a bite to eat. I mean, how are you going to make fun of that person? I just don't get it.
I don't know. Kids are very cruel. I was not brought up that way either. And I feel like my parents would have, especially my mother, would have busted my ass had she caught me like bullying poor kids. Just wasn't okay. It wasn't cool.
It's not cool.
Yeah. And I don't understand how parents can defend their bully children these days.
Well, if I was called to school and said, oh, your kid did this or said this, this, and this, I would be appalled.
I would not go to their defense.
And I would certainly not defend
I'd be
them.
like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yes, exactly.
Well, Janice showed up to school with matted hair, so dirty that teachers couldn't determine her natural hair color because her hair was so dirty and so matted together.
My God.
She had a face smeared with dirt and appeared black at times. It was so dirty. Her clothes were ill-fitting, usually too large and falling off of her. Like she would wear a pair of men's pants to school that were like tied around the waist.
So the poor girl didn't have a chance. Just the very thing you opened with.
And I don't understand because her dad worked for the DOT, so he was probably making decent money. But her parents were alcoholics and they just didn't give a fuck.
Well, yeah, I think that's what it boils down to is both her parents were checked out. It certainly sounds like her basic needs are not being met. And I mean, what do you do as a kid like that? What can you do?
Janice didn't get along with her peers at school and was a loner. When she was in second grade, her mother had an extended hospital stay, so Janice was given to neighbors for a couple of weeks while her mom was in the hospital. During this period, when she's staying with neighbors, Dylan, they only fed her one hot dog a day and mistreated the poor girl.
So her life barely improves when she moves on to stay with the neighbors.
Her father finally removed her from that home and she was sent to stay with relatives. Her relative, and I believe it was an aunt that she went to stay with, had 8 kids in the home, so Janice was just another unattended kid left to her own devices. While she was staying with these cousins, Janice began acting out violently toward the little kids, the younger kids. And once again, her father had to remove her from the situation. Lashing out at other kids was something Janice learned early on. She had pent-up rage against people in general, so acting out on other kids was pretty normal for her. And by the time Janice was in 3rd grade, the truth bubbled to the surface that Janice had been adopted. For the first time, Janice met her biological mother, Marie. However, that relationship didn't last very long as Marie died from cervical cancer soon after their introduction.
Damn. This girl just doesn't have very good luck.
When Janice was about 9 years old, she suffered a horrendous dog attack. The dog bite was pretty major, and it required cutting Janice's hair because of the wound. It was so deep. Elizabeth Adcock was more concerned with cutting her child's hair than the seriousness of the bite.
What? So does it say whose dog this is?
No.
Is it just a rant? It just briefly mentions it.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like a very serious wound.
Yeah, I mean, and instead of worrying about the severity of this bite, hey, my child was almost mauled. Her mother is more concerned about cutting her hair.
So here's one more
That she doesn't take care of and doesn't comb and doesn't wash. So, like, what was the big deal with cutting the girl's hair?
Yeah, I mean, hell, she probably needs her head to be shaved, to be honest with you, right? Start all over and, keep it clean and healthy. But this is another trauma. A dog attack or bite is a very traumatic event. And so here's one more trauma on top of trauma. I don't know how she's supposed to deal with all this.
You're right, Dylan. A dog bite is very scary to me. Like, I already have a healthy fear of large dogs, I would say. And I'm always afraid of a dog bite.
Well, yeah. I mean, and it's like, I guess one reason I think it's so scary is because then you're around other dogs. It's not like you're going to go the rest of your life, never be around a dog. You know what I mean? Like if you're out in the woods and a bear scares you or, even attacks you, you're not going to run across a bear every day, right?
And I say I'm afraid of big dogs, and statistically, a small dog, actually a wiener dog, is more likely to bite you than any other dog, and they're the little tiny ones, you know?
Yeah, but I think those types of that's a case in point where you take statistics kind of out of context. Because if a small dog bites you, it's not as bad.
Well, right. There's a
If
difference between
yeah,
like a little dachshund biting you versus like a pit bull like tearing into your arm,
well,
right?
I would say there's a huge
I mean,
difference.
come on. Well, Ralph, Janice's father, was an alcoholic, but he was also a kind man. Elizabeth was a harsh woman who often verbally and emotionally abused the young girl. Elizabeth would remind Janice that her real mother was a prostitute and often told Janice, "You'll end up just like her."
These children that end up in these horrible homes and then end up in a, they probably at first think, hey, thank God I'm out of that household, and end up in a neighbors, friends, family, whatever, and then they're treated like shit again. I just, I don't know how, why, I don't know why someone would take on a child just to treat them like shit, right? If you're going to treat them like that, don't even bother in the first place. But yeah, just, I don't know.
She also reminded the girl that she was bought and paid for, so the Adcocks could say and do anything they pleased. That's what Elizabeth would say to her.
It's very healthy.
Since Janice had been school age, the local social services had been involved in her life, sending a caseworker out as many as like 4 times a year just to check on the family and the situation. The caseworkers reported back on the family's living conditions and the child's filthiness. When Janice was 13, her father, Ralph, died. And he had kind of been the only person in her life who had shown her any kind of affection or kindness, had shown care, or paid attention to her. It was really devastating. The loss of her father, it just sort of sent her into like this deep depression. And it was only 9 weeks or so after Ralph's sudden death that Elizabeth brought home a man named Harold Peace, whom she claimed was her husband's best friend.
9 weeks later, here's another man in the house.
But this was a lie, Janice knew, as her father had, didn't really have a whole lot of friends, and Janice was basically his best friend. He spent all of his free time with her. He didn't hang out with friends. He was with his daughter all the time.
So the poor girl's left to wonder where the hell did this guy come from, and why are they lying to her, right?
Elizabeth continued drinking and berating her daughter. One night soon after Harold moved in, he tried to molest Janice. She screamed when the man hovered over her bed, fondling her. He whispered, "This isn't over," before leaving her alone.
Oh my God.
Well, the next day, Janice ran away to make a phone call to the social worker at social services and told what had happened. She was immediately removed from Elizabeth's care and placed into a foster home in Dallas, Georgia. This foster home was relatively normal, decent, Janice described it, but soon after, the state put her up for adoption, as she was not legally the Adcock's child, and her biological mother was dead. She didn't know who her dad was.
So basically, the state took over her her custodianship, if you will,
Yes.
and she's a ward of the state, being put up for adoption again.
Right. So then they move her into a series of foster homes. So it's like, why are you doing this? If she's in a house, things are normal, she's doing okay, why would you move her to a different house?
These types of systems always do dumb shit like that. That it just brings more instability into these children's lives.
Well, she's just moved from foster home to foster home, some good, some bad, this poor girl. And at one home, Janice reacts violently to house rules. She doesn't like the rules that are put into place and starts hitting her foster mother. She blamed the system for her behavior, not herself. Janice never blamed herself for these actions.
I think people that have never been part of the foster home, either as a child or say a family, hosting a child, I think we assume that there's this rather intense scrutiny, and like the whole system is like set up to help the kid, right? But
We hear horror stories.
we hear horror stories
every day.
from friends, from from other people that that's not how it is at all. And it's like the to find a good foster home, a loving
It's
one.
like a needle in a haystack.
Yeah, it's more often than not they're dysfunctional or dangerous in some form or fashion, and that just that hurts my heart. And
Well,
really
we
on
have this system that is set up and in place to help children, and in the end, it usually causes more damage or more harm than if they were just left in the bad situation they came out of.
well,
Right?
in some instances, you'll have family members who want to take over, care of the child, and they'll have some low-level drug charge or some bullshit charge from when they were teenagers or something like that, and they're like, "Oh, you got a criminal history, you can't do it." So we're going to give them away to this, perfect stranger who's had multiple
A creep.
a creep, and the kids, have tried to reporting them multiple times or God knows what. So yeah, a lot of times the system just doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. Well, finally, after running away from multiple foster homes coupled with these violent outbursts, Janice was sent to Cedartown, Georgia, to Murphy Harp's home. It was a dorm like setting with little supervision. Things were going well there until Janice got into another fight. And that's when the state finally sent her back to Elizabeth Adcock. Only this time, Elizabeth had sold the family home and was living in an 8 by 35-foot camper with some random man she'd hooked up with.
So the situation's devolved with Miss Adcock.
They didn't have plumbing, they didn't have an indoor toilet, no running water, the conditions were squalid at best, and Janice began sleeping in an old abandoned van on the property.
Down by the river.
Pretty much.
My God, this poor girl.
Yeah, I mean, she's living in this van. She felt like it was the safest place to sleep because she was creeped out by her mom's new boyfriend.
I guarantee that's why she picked the van over even the a bed there in the camper or whatever.
Well, imagine this child sleeping in a van. In the summer, there's absolutely no air conditioning, and you're in sweltering Georgia heat and humidity, right? And then in the winter, you have no heat.
And it still gets fairly cold in Georgia.
Yeah.
Right.
And choosing that over like staying inside the camper, I mean,
Well,
it's got to be bad.
she probably felt safer with it. At least she knows when someone's trying to come into her space. So sad.
By this time, Elizabeth is rarely sober, and the emotional abuse has taken its toll on Janice. She quit going to school altogether, and by 14, Janice is back in foster care. Janice decided sex work was the only way she'd earn enough money to take care of herself, but there was just one problem. She was a virgin.
Oh, my God.
She knew a boy whom she'd asked for a ride to Atlanta, but he didn't have a car. Janice offered to trade her virginity for a car ride, so the boy asked an older friend to borrow his car. The friend agreed to drive Janice and the boy to Atlanta. The driver pulled the car over in a secluded area so Janice could have sex with this boy, and afterwards the driver climbed into the back seat and raped Janice.
Wow.
Feeling guilty about what had happened, the boy took Janice to his house, offering her a place to spend the night. However, his mother freaked out at the sight of this dirty, grimy girl and knew something wasn't quite right and was like, absolutely not, this girl is not staying at our house, and called police.
So the guy didn't even give her a ride to Atlanta.
No!
Not that that would make it better.
No!
So he just took her out some dirt road somewhere to, I would say consensual sex, but that was under strange circumstances. She's actually bartering her womanhood. I don't know if that's a way to say that.
Her purity, Dylan.
She's giving away her purity for a ride, and then gets raped by the other guy she doesn't even like at all, I guess.
Doesn't know.
And doesn't know. And now
And
it
is
didn't
quite
even,
older.
and he just dropped him off back at the house, dude.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Janice was then taken into custody and dropped off in Rome, Georgia at the Regional Youth Development Center. And you may recall this from our Judith Neely case.
Yes, the Neelys.
Elizabeth didn't want her back, and Janice was eventually sent to Macon, Georgia to a girls' facility. It was another dorm-style living facility, but the girls were actually taught some life skills at this place, like how to operate a cash register, how to sew, how to cook and clean. Janice adapted pretty well to this place, even singing in the girls' choir. She got to go to a real summer camp while she stayed there. So overall, I mean, Janice thought it was great.
So her experience there at the Rome Youth Development Center was a good one in her
Well,
mind.
they had sent her there briefly before sending her on to this girls' facility in Macon.
Okay, see, she can just never find any kind of peace, or if she does, come to a foster home or a group home that she doesn't mind, makes some friends, and it's finally feels safe even. Though she doesn't know when she's going to get sent off somewhere else.
But Janice, up to her old tricks, ran away with a friend. They turned themselves in after only 9 hours on the lam.
That sounds like me if I run away from home right now.
Basically, Janice said it was because her friend wouldn't stop whining and was getting on her nerves. So she was like, let's just turn ourselves in.
Like it gets dark and like you decide you're going to go back home, even though you were talking about you're going to run away
Yeah, with your little poke.
with your little poke on a stick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That you packed like some of the most useless things. Like I remember trying to run away as a kid and packing like, my favorite Barbie
A can of corn.
and like a really dressy outfit and, yeah, like a can of corn.
Your tap shoes.
Yes, so of course. I took them everywhere.
Because you thought there's just the off chance you might have to perform.
Yeah, I packed like my little Shirley Temple dress and my tap shoes.
Okay.
In case there was like a Daddy Warbucks around who
Yeah.
wanted to adopt me. Exactly. Well, despite this episode, Janice was finally given due to this, I don't know why I said despite, due to this episode, the running away, which had happened multiple times, Janice was finally given a psychiatric evaluation. This was in October of 1977. The test revealed that Janice suffered from an immature personality disorder. She was compliant, had no impulse control, poor judgment, and they determined she was easily manipulated by others. She again attempted to run away from the Georgia industrial home in Macon. And by this time, the state was just done fooling with Janice, and she was sent back to Elizabeth Adcock. At this time, the state granted custody to Elizabeth because in all of this 14, 15 years, this woman's never had legal custody of this girl.
I mean, did she want legal custody of her? I mean, because it seems like
I'm not sure.
Miss Adcock, you've been baiting me with that name the entire time. I shall not comment on that name. I wish that was my last name, and I would have all kinds of things I could say about that. But so, it seems like her life is worse and worse every time Janice comes back around to her.
Well, this time, Dylan, things were different. Elizabeth was sober for the first time, and she didn't have a boyfriend in tow.
Okay.
The pair moved to Adairsville, Georgia for a fresh start. It was May 11th of 1978 that 15-year-old Janice meets 26-year-old Danny Buttrum. And it was love at first sight for this poor, affection-starved girl.
Well, I think this is common, and people have these kinds of pasts, and then if she truly does have this immature personality disorder or whatever, and overly compliant and kind of clings on to somebody, I think they're just looking for a way out of their situation, and no matter who it is, right? I think that's what Gypsy Rose was doing when she kind of latched onto that guy, and they loved each other, and I think they could have just left. I don't think they had to, murder her mother, but yeah, I think a lot of times they're just trying to, they'd be happy anybody to take them away from their situation.
And this was like the minute they get to town. So they had only lived in Adairsville for like 24 hours when she meets this guy.
Right.
Danny offers to take Janice for a ride. So the pair cruise around Adairsville, and when they return back to Elizabeth's house, she asks, when are you two getting married?
No.
Yeah.
So, like,
Trying to marry her daughter off to a man who's 11 years older and is an adult and is 26 and she's just turned 15. I mean, come on.
well, I mean, yeah, in the first place, they shouldn't have went anywhere for a ride any damn where. So, oh my God. Okay.
So they're like totally in love after having spent like, 3 hours together.
Oh, it must have been some 3 hours.
Seems reasonable. And soon after meeting, both Janice and Danny began skipping out on their probation because they're both on probation because I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Danny is a shitbird.
Well, I mean, I knew that already. You wanted to go for a ride with a 15-year-old. So I already marked him off my list.
Janice wasn't going to school. Danny couldn't keep a job. He was an alcoholic and a drug addict who popped speed like candy. Soon, Janice is pregnant. The pair did a lot of running around to obtain birth certificates in order to marry, but Elizabeth wouldn't sign for her daughter. So there's a lot of back and forth about trying to find someone who's willing to marry them and then also trying to get Elizabeth's permission.
Yeah, okay. I guess back then they probably still did the blood tests and all that mess. So they had to jump through these hoops, getting things ready, getting ready for the baby. Go get some drugs for Danny so he can be ready for the baby. Yeah, it's a lot to go through.
Finally, on June 26th of 1978, less than 6 weeks after they met, the pair were married at a Church of God. On their wedding night, Janice expressed discontent with Danny's drug use and asked if he could stay sober just this one night. So what does Danny do?
He went and got fucked up.
He beats her up.
Oh, God.
And then he gets fucked up. Danny began isolating Janice from her family. He was possessive and physically abusive. Danny was in and out of jail, like basically his entire adult life. His mother, Evelyn, ever the enabler, was jumping to bail him out each time. As a matter of fact, Evelyn became a bondsman in order to more conveniently bail her son out of jail when he needed her to.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
I must say that's on the enabling front. That's some dedication on his mom's part.
And Danny was a mama's boy, too. Evelyn seemed to be the only person who could control Danny. She is the only one he will listen to.
Yeah, God forbid Danny owns up to some consequences for his actions and it actually has some self-reflection and changes his life for the better. Let's just keep bailing him out and trying our best to get him out of trouble.
We know those parents.
Because he'll learn his
We've
lesson.
seen those parents in action.
Yeah, well, that's when you end up in
They create monsters.
Your son still lives in your house and he's 40 fucking years old. He's just he's got like some friends he games with or some shit. And he's just kind of creeping around the edges waiting for you to die so he can get the house. So he can move upstairs.
We know that guy.
Jesus Christ.
In February of 1979, the Buttrum's daughter, Marlena, was born. For a period, things were as good as they could be. Danny was working and attentive to Janice and the new baby. But soon, Danny falls off the wagon, starts hanging out with some bad hombres.
Oh, my God.
Had to throw in that reference to
Damn.
Trump. And started using drugs again. He wasn't seeing his probation officer and was finally sentenced to serve 6 months in jail for violating the probation.
Over and over and over again.
Repeatedly, yes.
And he finally gets some time.
He was given a chance to serve the time at a work camp in Marietta. Now, during this time, Janice moved back to Adairsville to live with her mother, Elizabeth. She got welfare for the baby, but was so lonely without Danny that she began seeing other men. Janice admits during this time she was promiscuous, essentially sleeping with any man or boy who'd pay her the slightest bit of attention.
Okay, well, I think she may have some self-esteem issues.
You think?
Yes.
Yeah.
You ain't gonna wait for me, Janice?
6 months.
You can't wait?
It's too hard.
I lay here every night in this cot in this dorm setting of this work farm, and I think of you, and I think of our love. And I think of how you're probably just waiting for me to feel my touch, because you always said I was a man with slow hands.
Mm-hmm. And she's saying, well, the best way to get over somebody is to get on top of somebody else.
Yeah, that's a classic.
Yeah, that's what my grandma always said.
Yeah, well, and poor Janice, she has terrible self-esteem issues, I'm going to guess, and on top of probably, 50 other issues that I couldn't even begin to unpack.
Yeah, I know. We probably shouldn't be making fun of her.
We're not making fun of her for being
ways,
promiscuous.
She's pitiful. She really is.
She's pitiful. Her traumas, my God, all the stuff, and people react different ways, against or because of those traumas. And I'm just making fun of Danny.
You're promiscuous without having all that trauma.
That's not true. I'm just promiscuous with you.
You're a big slut.
I'm a big old steamy slut.
Yeah, exactly.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, we all know about you.
Damn, baby, get the baby oil.
Ew. Sounds messy.
And a rubber sheet.
I don't like oily stuff. Now, when Danny is released from jail, the couple is homeless. Elizabeth won't allow Danny to stay at her home, so I guess Elizabeth has some standards. Just a joke. The couple begins a transient lifestyle, moving from place to place. Danny stays in trouble as usual. It's usually DUIs. He's constantly pulled over for drunk driving.
Petty criminal, I'm sure.
Yeah. Just
petty theft,
bullshit,
loitering, running his mouth,
drunk and disorderly.
somewhere loaded, talking shit to somebody in a gas station parking lot.
Exactly. You know Danny.
I've seen this guy before.
Well, I mean, he just stays in trouble. And Janice is an enabler, much like his mother. Like, just goes along with it, anything to make Danny happy. The drug-fueled violence increases, and Janice turns to the only helpful person she knows, an older cousin who'd often taken her to church when she was a child. And this woman is a very devout Christian. Janice really looks up to her, thinks she's very intelligent. She's like one of the more normal people in her life. Her advice to Janice is basically, you've made your bed, now lie in it. I mean, she tells her marriage is a sacred vow and divorce is a sin. And you've made your choice. You have to stick with this man.
Well, I mean, I think maybe she thinks her heart's in the right place with that kind of statement to Janice. But my first piece of advice would be like, get away from this guy as far as you can, because he's no good. He's not going to change. He's already he's 11 years older than you.
Yeah.
So he's already, grown up. No matter what age you are, he's not going to change. He's likely not going to change.
Well, don't you think that probably during this time, there was a generation, of course, much older than us. I think probably like around our, grandparents or maybe even our parents' generation, that they were brought up to believe this. Like, you didn't get a divorce, and even if there was domestic violence in the household, like, you just stick it out. Like, you marry this person, this is just your life.
Well, yeah, I think that's definitely true. You hear of these elderly couples that have been together 40, 50 years, and you're kidding yourself if you think those were all golden, beautiful years. They fought through, adultery, lies, maybe domestic violence. Who knows? But they insisted they were going to stay together no matter what.
Well, right. So I think a lot of times now when people are like, oh, look at our grandparents, this golden generation. And it's like, well, yeah, women had to stay and put up with shit because they didn't have their own money. They didn't have their own income. They had no means. They were, they would have been single moms. I mean, come on. Yeah, they endured a lot of horse shit.
Well, and everybody in their family saying you have to stay with it, including their mom or other females they may look up to in the family. You have to stay. There, you can't get divorced.
So it wasn't so much that like times were better back then. It was that times were worse, and you just didn't have anywhere to go, right?
Possibly.
So in this 2-year span of their marriage, Janice would estimate that Danny had beaten her probably 15 to 20 times. And this wasn't just like he slapped her through the face. These were like beatings.
Right, and you can probably add on other countless times of him screaming at her, emotionally abusing her if he doesn't have his drug.
Slapping her through the face, shoving her, pushing her down. That was just common.
Throwing dinner against the wall, screaming at her, that kind of shit. Just just a horrible person to be around.
Yeah. Feeling hopeless, Janice remains in the marriage. But once again, Danny is picked up for another DUI. Only this time, he is facing a habitual offender charge, which could land him some serious prison time. He is again placed in a work camp. Danny decides to run away from the camp, and he needs a place that's sort of out of the way to hide out. He phones a friend, John Teams, in Carbondale, Georgia, to ask if he can come work for John. So Teams has a Phillips 66 gas station. It's part of like a truck stop, and he hires Danny as a mechanic's helper.
Okay.
So the Country Boy Inn was a motel located by this truck stop. It was a place for transients. Many are blue-collar workers, living kind of, hand to mouth, who needed a place to rest for the week. $50 would be the rental price for a week stay.
Wow.
At the Country Boy Inn.
Man, I bet there's a lot of hand-to-mouth there at the Country Boy Inn.
Danny and Janice Buttrum had been staying at the Country Boy Inn about 2 weeks when they met a young woman named Demetra Parker. 19-year-old Demetra was from Kenton, Tennessee, just beginning to spread her wings. She was born July 31st, 1961, to a mother, Barbara, and Demetra had been dating a young man named Henry Wallace on and off for about 4 years while she was in high school. She had moved in with him in Dalton, Georgia, at his sister's house. And while staying in Dalton, Demetra had been employed at a carpet mill. With many changes happening kind of all at once, Demetra felt she needed some space and time to consider her future. So she moves out from this house that she's sharing with her boyfriend and his sister and her husband. I mean, that's a crowd. It depends on the size of the house, but that's a lot. You got two couples living under one roof.
Well, yeah, and you might feel like a third wheel in a situation like that.
Well, and it's your first time away from home. You got a lot of life changes. You just start working this job. You're living with a boy, time away from home, no family around. I mean, that is a lot to work through.
Yeah, it can be exciting, and it can also be scary.
Well, Demetra had taken a room at the Country Boy Inn. For a week, the young woman resided at the motel, deciding what she wanted to do with her life. It was Labor Day weekend when Demetra made the decision she would leave the motel and move back in with Henry. On Tuesday, September the 2nd, 1980, after a long holiday weekend, Demetra spent much of the day packing her car up. Earlier in the morning, she'd been doing laundry with a young mother named Janice, who was also living at the motel. Demetra had taken pity on the girl who had no car and a baby. She had given Janice and her husband Danny, who was a mechanic, a few rides around town, helped them run some errands in the week that she had met them. After hanging out most of the morning with Janice and Danny, Demetra split ways with them. Seeing as how it was her last night at the motel, she called two friends to hang out, a guy named Timmy Sexton and another named Donald Goforth, and she'd met them while she was working at this carpet mill job.
Donald Goforth?
Yeah.
God, that's an awesome name.
After packing the car up, the young woman wanted to socialize. She invited the men to come over, hang out in this motel room. It was late summer in Georgia, hot and muggy, so Demetra left the door open to this motel room while the three watched a police drama called The Rookies on television.
Ooh.
Danny Buttrum was pacing in front of her door. He passed it probably 15, 20 times while they're watching this TV show. So like in the span of 30 minutes, he's back and forth, back and forth. And Demetra finds this odd, unsettling.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's you might pass a time or two, but it's a bit much.
Well, Danny had given her the creeps.
Well, because he's a fucking creep.
She'd noticed how he had gone out of his way to pay her unwanted attention, despite the fact that he was married, and Demetra was absolutely not interested. She asked Donald to close the door. She didn't like Danny Buttrum hanging around outside, and she sure as hell wasn't about to invite him in for Netflix and chill.
So she didn't even want to see this dude.
No.
That's how she doesn't care for him at all.
No, she told her friends, like, I don't like that guy. He's weird. He gives me the bad vibes. Like, just close the door.
Even if it's stifling heat.
I even want him lurking around outside looking at us.
Right.
So she expresses this to her two male friends. It's nearing 10 p.m. when Timmy and Donald depart the motel, and I think that Demetra drove them back home. She then stopped by Henry's house, and it was around 10, and visited for about 2 hours. Demetra left around midnight, hoping to catch a few hours of sleep because she was supposed to check out the following morning at 10 a.m.
So she's all prepared to get her little bit of belongings and stuff, clear out of the hotel room, and move back in with Henry, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Demetra had trouble falling asleep. She had a lot on her mind, her budding relationship with Henry. She needed to find a new job because she had been laid off from this carpet mill.
Wait a minute. They pulled the rug out from under her?
Yes. And, she was just kind of contemplating the next step. And I'm not sure if maybe she had made a couple of phone calls from her room, like, hey, I can't sleep, that kind of thing. It was around 4 a.m. that Demetra heard a knock at the door. At first, she ignored it, thinking it could be a mistake, someone just knocking on the wrong room door. But the knock persisted, and that's when Demetra peeked out the window. In the darkness, she could make out that it was 17-year-old Janice Buttrum from 2 doors down.
Okay. Man, I hope this isn't what I think it is.
Demetra opened the door to ask Janice, what could you possibly want at this early hour? Janice explained she needed a cigarette for her husband. The vending machine was broken, and Danny desperately needed a smoke. Demetra replied, "It's kind of late, don't you think?" but gave in after pleas from Janice. Demetra turned her back to fetch a cigarette from her pack, which was by the bed. As she turned her back, Danny Buttrum pushed the woman inside the room and to the ground. He then shoved his wife Janice out, onto the balcony.
Oh my God, he used her as bait.
Janice then went to get her 18-month-old daughter and returned to Demetra's room. She walks in, she places her young daughter on the floor by one of the beds and gives the kid a telephone to play with.
Okay.
So by this time, Danny has Demetra on the other side of the bed near the bathroom, because I'm imagining it's like probably the 2 full or 2 double-sized beds, right? And he's sexually assaulting her.
So basically, he didn't waste any time. He knew what he wanted to do. He used his wife as a bait, if you will, to get her to open the door, knowing damn well she wouldn't open the door for his creepy ass, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And just went straight to assaulting her.
Yes. It was then that Janice took a pocket knife from Danny's pocket. She began stabbing Demetra in the chest.
Okay.
Both Danny and Janice were attacking Demetra with blows and stabs coming down quickly from every direction. Demetra fought for her life. Janice would later say, quote, "That girl did not want to die."
Well, no, she's in full fight or flight, adrenaline's pumping, and, the whole time probably thinking, why? Why are you doing this to me?
Over 90 stab wounds were placed in Demetra's chest and abdomen. When the young woman lay dead in a pool of blood and gore, Danny took the pocket knife and slashed a deep wound across the lower part of her stomach, which left this big gaping hole, basically. He then found a toothbrush belonging to the victim and shoved it into her vagina.
Oh, it's a piece of shit.
After the attack, Janice took a ring from Demetra and a leather hair clasp. She picked up baby Marlena, who was still playing with the phone. Now imagine, they're raping and murdering this woman while their baby is playing in the floor feet away.
Yeah, I mean, there's no words to describe that,
Despicable.
Well, I mean,
disgusting, inhumane. This is just fucked up.
It's inhuman. It's evil. I mean, for lack of a better word, it's just pure dark energy, pure evil. I don't know how you can be that devoid of any feelings for anyone.
Janice then took the baby back to their room, washing off the blood from her hands. Danny took the keys to Demetra's 1975 Buick Riviera, figuring they needed a way to escape. He would later claim they dumped their blood-soaked clothes in a dumpster behind the truck stop and tossed the knife out somewhere along I-75. The clothes nor the murder weapon were ever recovered. A few hours later, Shambharkant Patel, who was the recent proprietor of the Country Boy Inn, he had only owned this hotel for about 18 months or so, was awaiting Demetra Parker's checkout at 10 a.m. She had told him, "I'm going to be down at 10. I'm going to turn my keys in." So he's up. He's waiting for her. And as a matter of fact, he's like in his bathrobe, like waiting to check her out behind the counter, right? As he looks down at the front desk, he notices a set of keys for room 243 lying on the desk. Now, these were the keys issued to the couple Janice and Danny Buttrum, who were paid up for the week. He had no idea that they were planning to check out and wasn't sure how the keys had gotten there. So he asks his wife and children, "Have any of you guys spoken to the Buttrums this morning?" And they're all clueless. They're like, "No, we don't know how the keys got there. We haven't spoken to them. They didn't tell us they were checking out."
So they hadn't seen anything.
No, so he was a little confused about this. When some time had passed, Patel went to room 253 to check on Demetra. He had known her to be a responsible young woman and considered that there was perhaps a problem, and he wanted to check on her. So he knocks on the door but gets no response. Patel then enters her room, recognizing immediately it was in shambles. The bed was messy with red spots on the sheets. The television was overturned, and there were towels all over the floor. When he walks closer, he makes a grisly discovery. That's when he finds Demetra's body lying bloody, sprawled out on the floor.
Yeah, I'd say likely between the beds or between the wall and one of the beds.
Yeah, it sort of sounds like probably the bed that would be the furthest from the
Right.
door, close to like where the bathroom was.
Yeah.
That she was kind of on the other side of that, almost like between the bed and the bathroom in that little area.
So he's got to be appalled at what he's discovered here.
Yeah. I mean, he was like freaking the fuck out. Well, he makes his way downstairs to the front desk and he phones the Whitfield County Sheriff's Office. As the man fretted in the parking lot over this brutal crime scene upstairs, he is first met by an ambulance. So the drivers were escorted to this hotel room. One of the drivers called in again for law enforcement, explaining that this was likely a homicide and they needed the coroner to come as well. Like, you guys need to get here ASAP.
We need everybody.
Like, this
Bring
is-
everybody.
Yeah, this is not something the ambulance can handle. 2 detectives with the sheriff's office, along with 2 GBI, or Georgia Bureau of Investigation, agents arrive at the motel pretty soon after. The room was exactly as it had been described over the phone, a wreck. Demetra Parker was lying in a large pool of blood. She had hair clutched in her hands, as if she had pulled hair, like she had really fought hard for her life.
See, it sounds to me like if there hadn't been 2 of them, if it had been just Janice or just Danny, I think she might have whooped their ass, dude. Because she fought for her life. There's no doubt about that.
There was blood splatter on the walls. The victim's legs were spread wide open and rigor mortis had set in. One of the officers would later say that he had hoped someone would cover this poor girl with a blanket or a sheet because of the indignant pose that she had been left in, and that he just felt like even in death, this poor girl's getting, like, no respect.
Well, yeah.
Like, it really troubled him that people were walking around this crime scene with this poor girl, like, spread eagle
It's
dead.
like,
Yeah.
I mean, you could still preserve the scene, but just, throw a light sheet over her, unless you're, directly, looking or investigating her body there. I mean, I think that goes to say how horrible the scene was and how her remains were left in a very bad way.
Yeah.
For him, that's all he could literally
Super
think about.
disrespectful,
Yeah.
and like a monster had to do this to this, this poor young woman. Officers went to work collecting evidence. Cigarette butts were pulled from the ashtray, and they were Marlboros, which Henry Wallace later confirmed were not the brand his girlfriend smoked. Sheets and towels were collected. Officers fingerprinted the scene, including a can of Coca-Cola that had been left behind. Patel noted Demetra's car was missing from the parking lot. In a fury of questions, Patel told officers about the keys he had found to room 243 on his desk, and he explained that this family, this young couple with a baby, had left that morning without any kind of warning.
And they're paid up and, all that.
Yeah, I guess when they were like, anything suspicious happened, he's like, well, these keys were left behind. There was a witness named George Dunningen who stayed in the room next to Demetra, and he told detectives he'd heard a commotion maybe around 4 a.m. and a baby crying. He hadn't thought much of it, as this motel was rather noisy. There was always something going on at all hours of the night.
Well, I could imagine there's maybe a little drug activity going on there. Maybe a few
Well, it's
women.
right by a truck stop.
Women of the night operating of the
You've
facilities.
probably got truckers in and out. You've probably got people partying. I mean, yeah. Another female guest of the motel said she had heard a knock on her door around 3 a.m., but had ignored it. And this person kept knocking, and it had kind of freaked her out. So she'd actually called the front desk and had spoken to a security guard who told her it was probably a drunk and not to answer the door.
Damn, bro, you think you could come by and check it out?
Well, now she speculates that it could have possibly been Danny Buttrum.
Well, sure it could. Danny's a creep. He's gonna scope out any woman around who might draw his interest in any form or fashion. And and he's gonna. It wouldn't surprise me if they tried 2 or 3 rooms before they got to her room that night.
So inside room 243, which had been rented to the Buttrums, it was evident that they had left the room hastily.
Quick, fast, and in a hurry.
Officers found a baby's birth certificate with bloodstains on it they'd left behind. There was a towel lying by the sink that had blood spots. There were 4 empty packs of Marlboro cigarettes. Why can't I say Marlboro?
Marlboros.
That's really hard to say.
Marlboros. Marlboros.
When I lived in Massachusetts briefly, there was this radio commercial that would play, and I guess it was like a contest winner, and they would ask this lady, like, where are you from, caller? And she'd be like, Marlboro, Marlboro. And so every time I see that word, I just think about that lady screaming with her Yankee accent.
Nice.
Marlboro. Anyway, so there were these empty cigarette packs and empty cans of Coca-Cola soda left behind, all like basically scattered all over the room.
Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's just a treasure trove of information here in the, room 2 doors down.
Well, if you remember, they found the Marlboros and the empty Coke can in Demetra's room as well. So all of this is fingerprinted, tagged, taken in for evidence.
All this blood evidence, I think we know whose blood it is.
The more detectives found in the Buttrum's room, the more information they wanted about Danny and Janice. Patel informed them that Danny had been working at the truck stop for a man named James Teams. When they interviewed Teams, which was fairly quickly, he told officers they would likely be able to find Danny's location out from his mother, Evelyn. She lived in Adairsville, and she often sent her son money. If anyone had a chance of speaking to Danny, it was definitely his mother. Detectives arrived at Evelyn's house in Adairsville with a lot of questions. At first, the woman was not forthcoming. She told investigators her last communication had been with Janice on September 2nd, when the girl had called to ask for $20 to pay toward the weekly motel rent. Evelyn told detectives that Danny would never do anything as they had described, and if he did, it was only because of Janice's influence.
How do you keep defending this shitbird son of yours?
With a lengthy criminal history?
Knowing damn well he was a piece of shit long before he ever met Janice, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he sounds like he's been doing this since he was a preteen, probably.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God.
When detectives threatened her with legal action, like aiding and abetting, Evelyn finally relented. She then confessed that early on the morning of September 3rd, an unfamiliar black car had shown up in her driveway. Janice had been the one who'd come inside asking if they could borrow some money, explaining that they were leaving for Florida. So she'd given them like a little bit of money, whatever cash she had on her, which probably wasn't much money at all. When Danny arrived in Pensacola, Florida, he had called from a payphone asking his mother to send $25 via Western Union.
My God, this guy, he just can't. He's so used to turn to his mom for help.
Mama!
Even, Mama.
I'm coming home, Mama.
Down there in Pensacola, and
Mama.
I ain't got no money, and God, they might be hiring, but I ain't working. You know what I'm saying, Mama?
Can I come suckle at your ATM teat?
With 2 E's.
Cracking under pressure, Evelyn called detectives with her son's whereabouts. She told them she was sending money to this Western Union, and that's where they would be able to make the arrest. By September 4th, the FBI became involved as a federal unlawful flight to avoid prosecution warrant was issued for Danny and Janice Buttrum. While Danny impatiently waited by this payphone for his mother to call regarding that Western Union payment, because again, this is pre-cell phone, this is before beepers. This is back when you had to find a payphone and you had to wait for someone to call you back there.
Right, because you got long distance charges and all that stuff.
Yeah. So he's like waiting around, and that's when law enforcement began closing in on the couple. Finally, Evelyn calls this payphone to tell her son that the money's on its way and they could retrieve it from a Romano Street Western Union location. The Buttrums driving the stolen car go to this Romano Street location to fetch the money. And while they're there, Danny sends Janice into a Newberry's department store where there is a soda fountain, telling her you need to go buy us a couple of hamburgers.
Okay, I'm getting hungry because asking my mama for money ain't easy.
While he's sitting in the car, the FBI surrounds him. Janice is standing in line waiting for their lunch when she's approached by 2 plainclothes agents. And Janice said she knew immediately that they were undercover officers and that they reminded her of the 2 men from Dragnet.
So it's pretty smart. They wait for them to separate, get a little space between the 2 of them, and then they close in on them. So as soon as they ran out of the state, they opened the door for the FBI to get involved, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Janice was handcuffed and led out of the store. Both parties were transported to the FBI's field office outside of Pensacola. Demetra's car was impounded by police. A sweep of the vehicle found 3 bloody washcloths. Later, the car would be released to Demetra's brother Kenny without being fingerprinted, which I thought was kind of interesting that they didn't really take the time to fingerprint the vehicle, anything like that.
Uh, if anything, maybe they felt like we've got enough evidence, guys.
Yeah,
I
maybe.
mean, we don't even need to go through that. Maybe.
While in custody of the FBI, Janice showed no remorse for her crimes. She chatted freely with investigators. Janice claimed Demetra was alive when they left her in the motel room. And after some yammering, because I have to say, like, just reading through some of the transcripts and information, this bitch did not shut up.
She was just talking.
She was just, yeah. I mean, to the point that the FBI were just kind of like, will you just shut up? Like, we're not even asking you questions.
Yeah, we don't want to talk to you
Like,
right
just
now.
be quiet.
Okay.
Like, she's just yammering away. Well, she admitted that she'd been the first one to stab Demetra with a knife. Janice explained that Danny was a, quote, somewhat of a drug addict.
He's somewhat of a shitbird.
And on the day of the murder, he'd been taking Black Beauties and Yellow Jackets. So I looked this up because I'm so naive. I don't know what drugs are.
Well, honestly, these are antiquated drugs and terms. I had no idea. I knew that a Black Beauty was a pill. I didn't know which way it took you.
Well, I remember there was a Whoopi Goldberg movie back in the 80s, and it was like Black Beauty, and it was about like some drugs.
They were trying to figure out where the Black Beauties were coming from.
Something like that. I can't remember. I just remember my Nana liked that movie because she loved Whoopi, and we watched it like several times on HBO when I was a small child. So, Black Beauties are speed, like an amphetamine.
Okay.
And the Yellow Jackets are basically pentobarbital, which is what killed Marilyn Monroe. It's a downer, and it's used to cure insomnia, and it's a short-term sedative.
Okay, so he's working both ends of the spectrum. He's getting all hopped up on speed, basically. And then when
Coming down with the Yellow Jackets.
when he needs to level out or get some rest,
He's pumping up the jam with the Black Beauties. He's bringing it down with the Yellow Jackets.
well, I thought, too bad it didn't kill him before he was able to kill this poor lady.
She told investigators they had spent nearly an hour in Demetra's room because the woman had been so hard to kill. During the interview, Janice was clearly trying to protect Danny. She told investigators she wasn't sure he'd even stabbed Demetra. She had been the only one who had stabbed him that she could remember, and that she had been the one who had stolen from the dead woman, that she stole this ring, the hair clasp. Janice admitted that while she was stabbing Demetra, her husband was masturbating.
Okay, that's very sick and disgusting.
Yeah. When the couple is finally extradited back to Georgia, they're riding together in the back of this patrol car, and Danny was no stranger to being in police custody, and he spent most of the trip in silence. Janice, however, would not stop talking to the sheriff and his deputy.
Okay, so she just can't shut up.
She just can't. Janice was a chatty Cathy. She's spilling details about the crime. She would talk about the murder and then ask like a bunch of questions. At one point, she asked the sheriff, "Aren't you supposed to feel bad when you kill somebody? Because I don't feel a thing."
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what's going on with Janice here? I mean, is she a victim of Danny's as well? Well, I mean, she seems to be. Before this murder transpired, she seemed to be his victim as well. I mean, what do you think about her and her part in this?
That's the thing. I have like conflicted feelings. Part of me thinks that she's just a fucking dumbass.
And she's kind of along for the ride,
like, she's
whatever.
She's just kind of dumb. Like, she doesn't seem that bright to me. You know? Like, I don't think she's particularly smart or intelligent. And she definitely has had a bad life, but I mean, she knows right from wrong.
Well, I mean, the level of her participation in this crime, I found surprised me.
I think she fully participated in the crime.
I thought maybe he'd use her as bait, get the door open. He's in there. He does whatever horrible thing he does, piece of shit. And she's kind of just in the corner, not helping to stop him, but at the very least, like just over there with the baby.
Well,
but she's
Dylan,
just all in.
They call this the folly of deux, the madness of two. right? And you get two people who, under normal or other circumstances, I don't know if we call it normal circumstances, probably wouldn't commit crimes like this, but then you get them together, and it's like the madness of the two people together. They commit these crimes.
You think that's very interesting. This could quite possibly be a case of that, huh?
So it makes me wonder, because I think Danny's a shitbird, and it doesn't surprise me at all that he did this, and he probably would have raped and murdered someone, or at least maybe raped a woman without having an
Eventually,
accomplice.
right.
Yeah. But Janice, I'm not sure she would have murdered someone had she not had a partner in the crime.
No, I mean, it's almost like she was trying to impress him or something. And I think you oftentimes see that overkill, very vicious crimes with these couples. And it's almost like they're trying to either outdo each other or impress one another.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. I just feel so terrible for the victim.
Yeah, this is a really sad story.
She was about to, she had all these possibilities in life. She worked and was trying to do for herself, and maybe jumped out there a little further than she meant to.
Making these big decisions.
Yeah, making these big decisions and going to go back with her boyfriend, who their relationship was blossoming, and find a new job. The world was her oyster. She could do anything, she probably felt, and
she was a beautiful young woman.
Be murdered and attacked by these insane fucking people.
And her beauty is actually going to come into play as we get more into the story, Dylan. So when Janice is interviewed by local investigators in Georgia, her story changed a bit. She claimed the whole thing was just a bad prank gone wrong. Janice said she and Danny had only planned to scare Demetra. They had no real intentions of harming the woman. Throughout the interview, it was clear that Janice was trying to protect the man she loved. She admitted to stabbing Demetra, but lost count of how many times. When asked by detectives if she knew it was wrong to kill, Janice said she knew the Bible said it was wrong, but she personally didn't think it was. And she said, quote, "People kill people all the time."
Oh, wow. Great answer, Janice.
Janice signed her handwritten confession without much coaxing. Danny, however, was a different story. While his wife had been careful to cover for him, Danny was quick to throw Janice under the bus.
Well, I mean, I knew that was going to happen.
He totally blamed Janice for the stabbing. It was his wife who went crazy in the room and grabbed his pocket knife from his pants that he had been wearing. It was his wife who had gone into this mad frenzy, stabbing Demetra more than 90 times. Then Danny stated that Janice was bisexual and that she had wanted to perform oral sex on the woman. He said that after Janice finished with Demetra, that's when he proceeded to rape the woman, but he couldn't finish.
Oh, okay.
A grand jury indicted both Janice and Danny on first-degree murder charges, rape, and theft. Now, awaiting trial, a pregnant Janice wrote love letters to Danny. In a letter dated November 5th of 1980, Janice wrote that she forced Danny to rape Demetra because the woman was prettier than Janice. She told Danny he'd done nothing wrong and that the motive had been pure jealousy. Janice was envious of the smart, beautiful Demetra, who seemed to have everything Janice didn't have.
Okay.
Judge Pinnell, who would be overseeing the Buttrum's murder trial, I thought this was interesting, would later preside over the famed Eric Rudolph case.
Really?
And these were actually the only 3 death penalty trials, or where death was on the table, that he ever presided over.
Wow.
Right? Well, Judge Pinnell ordered mental evaluations on both Danny and Janice. An evaluator described Janice Buttrum as someone who never stood a chance. She had developed an antisocial personality disorder as a coping mechanism. She lacked a conscience, she had no fear of consequences, and didn't think at all about the future. She told the examiners that losing Danny was her biggest fear in life. Not going to prison, not the death penalty, not being separated from her children. It was losing Danny.
So it's almost like she's fixated on Danny and her relationship with Danny. Well, that's interesting. You brought up that point earlier. Maybe she was also a ticking time bomb, just, waiting for the right set of circumstances to happen. Maybe she would have ended up in some horrible situation, whether she met Danny or not.
Maybe.
If any of this is true that the, psychiatrists are describing.
Well, despite Janice's issues, she was found competent to stand trial. Danny's evaluation revealed chronic headaches, which he'd sustained for about 4 years since getting hit in the head with a hammer.
It was probably somebody who caught him stealing.
I don't know the details of this getting hit in the head with a
It's
hammer,
probably
but
a rape
it did not
victim.
sound like an accident.
Hit him in the head with a hammer and
It
he went
sounded
on.
like an intentional, he got cracked in the head.
He probably deserved it.
He had previously spent 2 weeks at Rome Regional Hospital for depression related to drug use. In July of 1977, he had spent time at Northwest Georgia Regional Hospital for paranoia, homicidal feelings toward his mother after he had attacked her unsuccessfully with a butcher's knife. He denied this documented attack. He told administrators that he had had an urge to rape women and that on the day of Demetra's murder, he had paced around the motel room saying, "I'm going to do it. I'm going to kill her."
Oh my God. So literally when he's pacing back and forth in front of her open door, this was likely possibly what was on his mind.
Yeah, that he knew he wanted to rape her
God, I wish he
and murder her.
I wish she had just got her stuff and left with her friends right then. Like, you know what? I've had enough of this place. That guy's a creep. I'm going home anyway.
Or she'd gotten her boyfriend to come spend the night
yeah,
at the room with her.
anything.
Something.
Because that fucking coward Danny would not even try to make a move if she had her man or brother or friend there, right? Because we know he's a coward.
His mother revealed to doctors that her son had suffered quote-unquote mental spells for about 6 or 7 years. He would get so angry he would often black out, not remembering that he had broken furniture, or he couldn't recall these violent rages at all, like after he snapped out of it. Danny had hand tremors when he didn't drink alcohol. The family had a history of mental illness, including Danny's father, who had been hospitalized in the early 1960s. Danny claimed to suffer auditory hallucinations with voices telling him to do certain things. Danny's IQ was around 74. Doctors administering the personality inventory soon concluded that Danny was faking, like he was trying to make himself seem way worse than he actually was. So Danny was intentionally, quote, playing crazy on these exams and making up things that he thought would make him seem less stable.
We thought it would help him. Hopefully, in his mind,
exactly.
maybe I end up in a mental hospital or something instead of jail.
Exactly.
Where he could further prey on people and manipulate the system.
Well, these psychiatrists that were testing Danny noted that he had no psychotic symptoms and was competent to stand trial, that there was no reason why he couldn't go to trial. At first, Danny and Janice wanted their trials together, but Judge Pinnell refused and ruled against this. Danny's trial began on March 9th of 1981. During testimony, Danny's brother told the court that Danny had been drinking moonshine since about the age of 15. At 14, Danny was experimenting with drugs, marijuana, speed, LSD. His mother told the jury that Danny had been dropped on his head as a baby and had also sustained that head injury as an adult. He didn't seek any medical attention after being hit on the head with the hammer, and that's when he started having these major headaches. A witness who'd spent the evening of September 2nd, 1980 with Danny and Janice told the jury that while they were driving around, Danny had said he wanted to pick up a girl. During several stops, a drunk Danny had unsuccessfully tried to pick up 4 different women while Janice remained seated in the back of the car.
What the hell, Janice?
And this buddy who was driving them around would say to him, like, "Isn't your woman going to get mad about this?" And Danny would reply, "Well, as long as she gets to have a go with her first, she doesn't care."
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to shame anybody's kink, but, I mean, come on.
Danny didn't testify, and the jury took around 45 minutes to find him guilty. It was less than an hour.
Just enough time to get lunch.
Danny was sentenced to the electric chair in September of 1981. 1 week after receiving a death sentence, Danny Buttrum used the bedsheets to hang himself in his jail cell. In a letter to Janice, he wrote, "I have little to live for."
Well, you've been in and out of jail all your life.
Too bad you didn't do that like a year earlier, guy.
Yeah, before you killed this poor woman. Seriously. I mean,
before you were out being a shitbird and then murdering someone. Exactly.
Suicide's very scary and very sad for all those involved, especially the ones left behind.
Unless you're Danny.
Oftentimes, I think, unless you're a shitbird, then I advocate you doing it earlier on in your life.
Yeah, before you go killing innocent people.
Before you kill innocent people.
Janice's trial began August 28th of 1981. Her trial was delayed because she gave birth to a baby girl named Marie that same year.
Yeah, and surely they took the kid straight away, right?
The child was given to Danny's brother and his wife to raise. So her brother-in-law and sister-in-law. So by the time of Janice's trial, she had no family to offer any kind of moral support. Elizabeth Adcock had cut ties with her adopted daughter by then. And the evidence against Janice was staggering. 97 total stab wounds, overkill on this young woman. Demetra had been vaginally and anally raped. With no DNA evidence, blood type evidence only had been used, but her signed confession sealed the deal. In 2 hours, a jury of 5 women and 7 men found Janice Buttrum guilty of first-degree murder and recommended the death penalty. At her sentencing hearing, Janice testified that she had waited outside Demetra Parker's room for about 5 minutes after Danny had entered. When she did go inside, Danny was removing the victim's panties, and it appeared, she quote, said, "It appeared they were fixin' to have sex."
My God.
After the sight of her husband engaging in sexual intercourse with the victim, an enraged Janice grabbed the knife and stabbed Ms. Parker in the chest. At 17, Janice Buttrum was the youngest woman to ever be sentenced to death in the United States. She spent 8 years on death row until her conviction was overturned in 1989. Due to her age at the time of the murder, Janice was resentenced to life in prison.
Well, she certainly should never be back on the street, for sure. But I don't know, man. You know, these are so tricky. We keep running across this with these people with this, borderline intelligence as far as the tests and all that go. And they had these horrible lives. But I would argue thousands of other people grew up, with a horrible life and similar set of, social skills or however you want to word that. And they don't kill fucking people. So I don't think you should be able to hide behind that either when you're a willing participant like this.
While incarcerated, Janice has earned a college degree and works a full-time job. She doesn't see her daughters and has 5 grandchildren she's never met. Mrs. Parker, the victim's mother, visited Janice once in prison after her sentencing and told her that she forgives the woman for murdering her daughter.
Well, I think people do that for their own spirit, and that's it's not my business to say either way if you should or shouldn't do that.
Janice is currently serving her life sentence at Pulaski State Prison in Hawkinsville, Georgia.
Well, maybe it's better that she lives every day and knows that she can't see her children or her grandchildren or that she'll never be out again. I mean, maybe that's a better punishment. I guess it's really up to the family of the victims left behind to decide what's a fitting punishment, I guess.
Yeah. So now Janice is in her late 50s and will probably never see the outside world again.
So for all intents and purposes, she's spent her entire adult life in jail.
Yes.
After this horrible, heinous crime.
And the one thing that was her biggest fear, losing Danny, has happened. She lost him. Now, she is later, as an adult, come out and said that she realized all along that she was a fool. Danny didn't love her.
Well,
that he never cared for her.
She's right on that.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely right. Well, I mean, she certainly had, my God, already had plenty of time to reflect upon her behavior. But these situations where someone is stabbed 90, 100 plus times.
With a pocket knife.
With a pocket knife. So
no wonder poor Demetra didn't die. I mean, she's like, this woman didn't want to die. And I'm thinking, you were stabbing her with probably like a 2 or 3 inch pocket knife?
Yeah, so
it's no damn wonder.
We're talking about like death.
This is torture.
Death of 1,000 cuts kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? It was so horrible.
It is very barbaric.
And brutal and violent. And how another woman, that's what disturbs me about these types of situations. Another woman could watch another woman being brutalized, at the hands of a man.
And that you could go along with it because you're jealous.
You're jealous that, like, she stab him. Stab
Yeah,
him in the
he's the
fucking neck.
shitbird.
He's the one raping her. Shit, you should have. This whole situation been different if she'd have stabbed Danny in the fucking neck, saved that poor girl, and pulled him off of her, and she'd be a fucking hero, dude.
Well, again, I think that Janice is definitely a person who, as the psychiatrist said, as I stated in the very beginning of the story, she just didn't stand a chance.
She didn't stand a chance, and the only variable that is the worst part of it is another victim, another person got caught up in her fucked up life. I mean, really. Wow. I don't even know what to say. That's horrible. That's a horrible crime. And some of those may even been post-mortem, those stab wounds. How do you just keep stabbing someone that all those times? I mean, I don't know what.
Well, there's so much about this case that is just incredibly fucked up. I mean, you've got this horrific murder happening. You've got Janice, who's a teenager.
This whole time all that stuff you described.
She is a kid.
For what, 2 or 3 years of her life with Danny is just a pure fucking shit show in hell.
And then you've got her baby on the floor, feet away from where you and your husband are brutalizing this poor woman.
Yeah, and then you just get your kid and go back next door like, let's get cleaned up.
And though her baby, I mean, the daughter was like 18 months old when this happened, but who's to say that that's not embedded in that poor child's psyche? I mean, her little spirit has to remember that, or, you know what I'm saying? It's like, that's a really fucked up Dexter type of situation.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no way that helped her in her life and her energy. I mean, my God.
Well, it also makes me wonder, so Janice gave birth to a second daughter while she was in prison. I'm wondering if that baby belonged to Danny, because remember, he was away at a work camp and she was being wildly promiscuous during that time. So I wonder if that baby belonged to him at all.
Oh, yes, and I guess the murder wasn't all that long after he got out of jail and got back together, right?
Yeah.
A matter of 6 months or so. So, yeah, I guess it's quite possibly could maybe not be.
Which,
maybe.
I mean, it doesn't really make a difference for the story, but it's just tea I'm interested in.
It's definite tea. But, I mean, thank God that, children are removed and off with other people.
Well, let's hope that they had somewhat of a normal life after all of this.
Yes, certainly that's the only positive I think that could come out of any of this. I mean, my God.
What I thought was interesting is there is a photographer, and her name was Jan as well. I think her last name might have been Bunting. She went into this Georgia prison, this Pulaski State Prison, which is a women's prison, and as a photographer, she did portraits of the inmates and then had a little blurb she wrote up about their life. And her thing was like kind of challenging, what we believe about these women in prison, these inmates, and, they've served their time, but then they get out of prison and there's still like a stigma surrounding them, their crimes. You can do a quick Google search and see what they did. It's just something that's going to like follow them for the rest of their lives, which I understand where she's coming from. And it's a unique idea. But Janice is one of the women featured among these portraits. And I'm just like, yeah, you can read her story, but it's hard to have a lot of sympathy for this woman because she's a fucking monster. And even though she did have a terrible childhood and she was married to this awful person, she still actively participated, instigated even, the brutal murder of a 19-year-old young woman.
Well, she definitely, it seems like she's already being raped, which is right there next to murder. That's like she, took it up another notch. And who knows what was on Danny's mind.
Well, it's almost like Janice is so ignorant, and I don't mean that like she's just stupid. I mean like she's so ignorant and has never been taught better that she doesn't recognize consensual sex versus my husband is raping this woman. She just sees them and thinks, well, they're fixing to have sex.
Well,
and gets mad.
that's quite possible. That's
It's
quite
like
possible.
she's so ignorant she doesn't even realize that like what he's doing is wrong.
Well, if she has all those things, doesn't think about actions and consequences, or the moments directly after said action, and no empathy for others. I mean, I think she put all that on full display there in that hotel room.
Yeah, I mean honestly, Janice deserves to be behind bars, and I hope she's never released.
No, she certainly does not deserve, in my mind, to ever walk a free, be free.
Nope,
Nope.
no way. Well, I appreciate. I believe it was Eric recommended this case.
Oh, this is Eric's case,
It's
man.
a
I
good
knew.
one.
Yes, it was a great one. Thank you,
Never
Eric.
heard of this story before, but I appreciate the suggestion. We've gotten so many fascinating cases from our patrons and from our listeners. And if you have a great case suggestion, maybe something we've never heard before, email us mountainmurderspodcast@gmail.com. We love to hear from you guys. You can always hit subscribe.
Look, we've said this so many times. I don't think enough of y'all out there hitting subscribe. Just punch that subscribe button, no matter what player you're using. You're going to listen anyway. Help us out. It really helps us out.
We love those 5-star reviews. We got a great one today from Laura in Canada.
Yes, Laura, thank
Thanks
you
so much.
Thank you for your lovely 5-star review. Your words make us smile.
They make Dylan so happy.
Oh my
You
God.
should see how jolly he gets when he reads a good 5-star review.
Oh, I literally hold my belly and
It's like Saint Nick, exactly.
it is. It's Saint Dick.
She just shakes like a bowl full of jelly.
It's true.
Yep,
Sloshing around.
twerking all over the place,
Ooh,
left and right,
gosh.
cheeks out,
You just wait for the holidays.
sun's out, guns out.
Damn. You kinda okay. I'm running out of material
You
here.
can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And of course, if you're feeling generous, feel free to donate some money at patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast. It's a great way to support the show. All of those funds go right back into the podcast, help us maintain the show. And you're going to access bonus episodes, ad-free content, and get an invite to our Discord chat where we have a lot of fun. I know we talk about that quite a bit, but it's true. We have a blast.
We have a blast on Discord daily. So many great people there. They are our friends. We get to know them. They get to know us. It's so wonderful. And I just must don't forget, on Patreon, you can get ad-free content and all the extra content Heather mentioned. We have a lot of fun over there. And there's a tier for everyone. One for less than a cup of coffee, people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for that less than a cup of coffee, you can help Dylan get a beer. Just kidding.
That's the damn lie. Ain't never spent it on that.
Okay, well, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Mountain Murders, and we will be back on Wednesday with a brand new offbeat. Dylan, are you ready?
I can't wait.
Okay.